you all for your attention and to watch this presentation. This is actually an interactive presentation. So throughout the, my talk, I will invite you to contribute to the slides with some thoughts and ideas using a Mentimeter code and link. The code may expire by the time you access this recording, but I will provide the link as well in case you would like to contribute, because this is really a dialogue, and I would like this to be an open conversation between you and me as much as possible, and to continue then the conversation live in July during the conference on the 15th of July. So the project I'm presenting is actually a joint project. My name is Silvia Colaiacomo. I work at UCL, the Arena Center for Research-Based Education. And this is a project I'm working on together with colleagues from different parts of the university. The ones that you see listed on the slides are my colleague Lina from Student Support and Wellbeing, Amy, that is from Career Services, and then we have some students that are supporting us to the project, and these are Sofia Veili, and also there are other students that are not listed on this slide, but I absolutely thank for the great support that they are providing. The project was born, let me just continue so that you can have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. So the project was born by an idea of an intercultural communicative skills group, working group that was originally created by our Global Engagement Office. And then that sort of applied for some funding. And at the moment, we are working on putting together a set of resources, training resources for students and staff in intercultural communicative skills across UCL. So it is an overarching project, fairly ambitious, but starting on sort of a small scale by looking at, first of all, what is already there. Something that we know is there is already a lot of good practice going on in our institutions that sometimes is not even labeled as intercultural competence or intercultural communication, but we already have in the way we teach, in the way we welcome students or work with students in curricular and cross-curricular activities. There is already quite a lot out there that we are trying to bring together and develop within a consistent framework. And then another goal of the project is to develop, in our case, asynchronous resources and support to train colleagues and students in intercultural communicative skills, or to raise an awareness. I mean, this is not really a training aimed to be finalized by a final quiz, a final test. This is more an opportunity for us to reflect on what is the best way to work together as an intercultural global community in one of the largest universities in Europe or the world, really, from the point of view of learning and teaching, the point of view of sort of interacting with students, but also research, how to enhance intercultural communicative skills in labs, in large research projects with principal investigators. And then also a final strand that we want to cover in the project is creating a good learning environment and working environment for all, including colleagues in professional services. Very often projects in universities only address academic staff or students, but actually we want to involve also colleagues in professional services. And particularly this presentation concerned the development of some resources for intercultural assessment, which doesn't mean assessing intercultural skills, but it means to create assessment tasks for students across the board, regardless of their faculty or disciplinary area, the students from different cultural backgrounds can understand and approach constructively and perform at their very best. Very often assessment tasks are somehow biased in terms of there are cultural assumptions underpinning them, and we need to reflect a little bit more on the way in which we can sort of unpack those for our students. So I would like you to think about 3 words that describe your intercultural experience at your institution to begin with. And please pause the screen if you can, and go to www.mentor.com, as you can see on the top of my screen, and use the code 63562164. In case the code has expired by the time you're watching this recording, then you will be provided a link to contribute that also will give you access to the slides. So I gave you a few minutes to think. You can pause and then put your words in to see how actually we describe an intercultural experience. It's a fairly generic expression, and we can all approach it in a slightly different way. I will now move on and then let you reflect on the words you use. They could be positive, challenging, or very constructive, or quite critical. So, you know, feel free really to, you know, to describe the experience, you know, based on your own sort of institutional approach and work. And we will discuss this together on the 15th of July. Now, the 2 slides I'm going to present now have been really put together by our students that are working on the project. So I take no credit for this work. And this particular has been done by Veili, you could see on the first slide. Veili has been looking at student satisfaction surveys, the NSS score and the TEF score, and TEF scores and comments, to see how students feel in terms of belonging and assessment and feedback, learning community and student voice across different metrics. And as you can see, you know, she has been looking at NSS and PTES results, so even postgraduate students. And something that she noticed is that, of course, the feelings of belonging in institution, I mean, in this case is UCL, is fairly low, or quite low across the board, but actually increasing sense of belonging leads to a better student experience. She's been looking at different initiatives that have been taken in order to increase the student experience and through belonging, one of which has been led by student support and well-being. And also something that really noticed, and I think is extremely relevant, is that some ethnicities are really well represented in these metrics, but others, they don't seem to appear. And actually, they make up quite a large number of students in our institution. So we really need to interrogate our own practice in terms of how inclusive we are in terms of talking to different cultures and cultural backgrounds, and how we can encourage students from different backgrounds to provide, you know, to contribute to the survey and give us their feedback and be really an active part of our community. Moving on, again, about what we know so far, is that there is, again, we do have quite a lot of data when it comes to the Chinese students, and they of course, they are sort of a large number of our student population at UCL, so there is a fairly large representation, but we know less about other ethnicities and other cultures. To be fair, because again, probably there's not the same amount of students, that there's not the same level of let's say granular engagement through societies and student union and cross-curricular activities. But of course, at the same time, we know that international students, and this is one of the themes of this conference, are really the backbone of our universities. in terms of, generating income for us by, students number, the very good performance that they achieve, generally speaking, and also in universities like UCL or generally in the Russell Group, quite a lot of emphasis goes into generating opportunities for students, to contribute to student life. Although this seems to be contradicting the engagement statistics of my previous slide. So that, yeah, we have this double sort of figure. On the one hand, there is a big effort for engagement. On the other, students feel, let's say, a weakened sense of belonging. And now going on to give you a little bit more background. When it comes to our intercultural communicative skills project, so we try to avoid any rigid framework that really wants to see intercultural competence as a tick the box exercise, something more derived from the business world, with all respect for that type of work. But in our case, the framework we're trying to develop is more based on an idea of equality of capabilities. So make sure that all students can contribute to their learning experience and to the experience of the university at the best of their ability. So that there are opportunities for all of them, to make sense of their study, to contribute to their studies, to contribute to our research input and output in a way that is open, flexible, and inclusive. So we're really talking about a connection between intercultural awareness and internationalization of the curriculum, also, and inclusivity. These terms are always often conflated also in the literature in a way that is not always clear, but the main thing for us is to consider that we cannot have an intercultural curriculum. We cannot have internationalization in the curriculum if we don't think about inclusivity at the heart of what we do. And this is really the core of the project. Now, my second question for you is, what about your experience of assessing diverse cohorts of students? You may be a student watching this presentation, then you may want to report your experience as a student. You may actually approach this presentation from the point of view of a tutor, of a lecturer, of an academic. And then again, I would invite you to share your thoughts. This will appear on the slide at a later stage. And of course, it will be the backbone of our discussion on the 15th. So feel free to take a little bit of time, pause me, and again, type in your comments about your experience. This session, as I said, is thought to be an interactive session rather than a presentation. So very much a workshop. And I'm trying to experiment how successful this can be done in a way that is asynchronous with you. Now, I'm going to give you a task. So I'm going to ask you to read a task brief for an assignment in a business school. This is a real assignment from a real university that I found available online. And I would like you to look at it and think about what are potential sort of biases, cultural biases that are underpinning this assignment, and to think about possible improvements and changes. So again, once I move to the next slide, feel free to pause the screen, have a good reflection, write something down, and then elaborate on your thoughts. This is not me providing answers, but it's mostly engaging you in a conversation. So this is the task, and you have the link of the institution or the provider I took it from. Okay. So I'm going to show on the next slide what I highlighted, that I think this is a standard assignment, and we find many of them in our universities, in our institution. A standard assignment that is provided to students from very different backgrounds. I'm not just talking about different nationalities and languages, but also students with different socioeconomic backgrounds, part-timers, full-timers, students with care responsibilities outside the university, students approaching their degrees from many different angles and perspectives. And what we can see here, we can see that, first of all, there is a group task. Whenever we think about a group task, we really need to be careful about how we put together the group. Group tasks are great also to enhance soft skills, communication, negotiations, etc. But we need to somehow support students in working together. We cannot take for granted that students are able to contribute to a group according to certain cultural parameters, again, in terms of collaboration, negotiation, without supporting them or engineering the group. So giving clear roles, clear instructions, maybe follow them at the beginning of term with some formative practice, or supporting the groups throughout the term by providing feedback through their work, and making sure students understand their roles and their responsibilities within the group. So of course, this is doable, but just is for us an opportunity to think about how we can best create a group that is working together. And then we're talking about an evaluation. There is the group is conducting a project with a process and evaluate. So if we're evaluating something, against what? Do we have a set of criteria for this evaluation? Maybe that's the case, but maybe not. So again, this is an opportunity for us to reflect. So we are evaluating against what type of criteria. Are these shared with our students? Do they have a good understanding of how they need to evaluate something? And then we're asking students to write a project report. Again, a project report may look very differently depending on the context in which it is created. So are we providing students with an exemplar? Do students have access to other project reports throughout the course that somehow can model their practice? There's nothing we can take for granted that, possibly a project report in a particular culture, in a particular cultural environment. I'm not just talking about nationalities, but in a particular, even professional environment may look very different from another. And for students whose first language is not English, are we sure that they are supported to have the right sort of linguistic resources to write the report according to the certain standards? Maybe yes. Again, maybe I'm just sort of mentioning something that is already part of the module and is well articulated in the syllabus, but these are things we need to consider whenever we provide an assignment to our students. Do they know the rules of the game, basically? And then other things I picked up by looking at this task brief is we're talking about employee relationship, real world job. What is it? This is non-neutral. Again, this is very much depending on the culture in which the job is taking place, different legislation, this different policy frameworks, and what is a real world job? I mean, do we know how to define it? Is it something that is the same internationally, or again, maybe students coming from different backgrounds may have different perceptions of what a real world job is? And then finally, and this is, I think, is the most problematic bit of this task brief, we're talking about using personal and professional networks. And again, if we have multicultural groups working together, teams working together, these may again look very differently. And also we may risk putting some students at a disadvantage or an advantage depending on the networks and the resources they have to access a particular cohorts of professionals or professional networks. So an assignment that looks like fairly standard can be highly problematic if we don't work with students in a way that really unpacks the language of the assignments, therefore also the language of the marking criteria, and that sets clearly expectations and manages expectations and somehow the rules of the game, for example, when it comes to group work. So this is basically the point of this session, to make us reflect on whenever we assign a task to students, are we making sure that this task is accessible and comprehensible from a variety of approaches and perspectives, and students coming from different cultural backgrounds? Do they have all the tools they need in order to unpack the assignment in the best possible way? I always bring the same example. I came to the UK as an international student. My first assignment was to write an essay. I had never written an essay before because in my undergraduate degree, I was never asked to write essays, and I didn't know the standards of an academic essay in the UK. And therefore, my performance wasn't the best, but not because I had a lack of capabilities. And we still tend to have a deficit discourse when we talked about international students, but simply because I hadn't been exposed to this type of assignment before. So there's an opportunity to think about, do students really understand what we mean when we ask them to do something? Or can we be more explicit? Can we provide exemplars? Can we engineer the work and follow it up for a number of weeks to make sure the students are on track? So to conclude, we have developed sort of a draft toolkit for intercultural aware assessment, and this is derived by and adapted by the work of Betty Lisk, that I'm sure you're all familiar with in this particular conference. So she identified 6 principles of teaching across cultures, and we try to see how they would translate into an assessment toolkit. So by looking at the right-hand side of the screen, let me just move my face. So how can we ensure students engage with resources in a way that makes them more aware of sort of the cultural underpinning of these resources? First of all, to engage them in active learning. So trying to use class time to engage them through activities that somehow can resemble the final assignment and offer good opportunity for feedback. Number 2, get to know our students and their background to make sure that we can provide not simply the right support, but that we can build an environment where they feel confident to speak up, to ask questions, to provide, to contribute in the best possible way. Number 3, let's unpack assumptions about class dynamics and participation. So if a student is quiet, it doesn't mean that the student is disengaged or it's passive, but maybe in the culture of this particular student, being quiet in class is a sign of respect towards the teacher. So let's try to challenge these assumptions that a quiet student is a disengaged or passive student. Number 4, provide different fora for students to express themselves and their views. So I'm using Mentimeter in this presentation. If we can see that oral engagement, verbal engagement in class is possibly not the ideal format for all students to participate, let's give the opportunity to students to participate anonymously via Mentimeter. And then let's build their confidence so that week after week they can start to participating in class. For us as educators, number 5, we can engage in professional development as educators. So participating in this kind of conferences, but also engaging with the curriculum developers of our institution to think about specific training when it comes to working with international cohorts. And also number 6, I strongly believe in this point. Let's try to establish a link between something which is specific about a discipline, but also the long-term benefits of training a particular transferable skills, for example, communication or working in a group. We use a lot the term employability in the UK, and I know that some institutions or some colleagues look at this term with more sort of a critical eye rather than others, thinking, okay, then universities are just turning into some sort of training experience. Well, I think we need to look beyond this sort of dichotomy and really see the fact that, discipline-specific discourse, discipline-specific competences and areas of knowledge can actually link to the development of a number of abilities that inevitably are going to benefit our students in their post-university life. So in terms of expressing themselves, so they're articulating their thoughts, being able to interact with others, being able to be critical, etc. So I would suggest going beyond the term employability and really look at the transferable skills that students develop through their university studies. And now a final point that I want to share with you is about, so how do we translate this into assessment? Well, let's provide opportunities for feedback. Let's ask students how they used to be assessed in their previous institutions, in this previous experience. Let's spend time to do some guided marking with them and work with exemplars. Let's provide opportunities for formative assignments where students can practice, receive feedback, fail, and learn from their mistakes, really. And then I put number 5, come to Arena, which is the center at UCL that provides support for colleagues. But let's go and use the different sort of centers for educational development in the different institutions. And also, again, let's consider formulating our tasks and task brief in a way that students can make this link with their life outside academia. Now, a very final point before I close this presentation is to show you the pillars of employability that we developed at UCL, and this is the work of my colleague Amy that is part of the group and this presentation, although she's not presenting with me today. So UCL developed a framework of pillars of employability, really to consider how curriculum and teaching and learning are interweaved with the developments of students beyond academia. Again, I would suggest looking at the term employability with an open mind. And so looked at a number of different pillars that can elaborate on this concept. So it's about the development of skills, knowledge, the development of global citizenship in terms of really being able to interact with a broad variety of other people from across the globe, and to be able to deal with situations that are unusual, new, and even uncomfortable. And then also another of the pillar is to be able to make good decisions and good planning, and also to work with key values like resilience, adaptability, and all these are very strictly connected with intercultural communicative skills. And then also to be able to build and develop and foster networks and experience. So all these transferable skills in the pillars, they do have a strong connection with intercultural communicative skills. And finally, I just want to show you how the global citizenship pillar can actually translate into some intended learning outcomes. As I said, you will have access to this presentation via the Mentimeter link, but this is an example of practice where we try to spell out how we can actually work with these skills, not as a standalone course only, not just as an additional training that students and staff need to go through, but as part of disciplinary sort of knowledge development, as part of the standard curriculum. So I hope that this is a very short intro to what we're trying to do. And again, I hope that the interactive element helped you to have a little bit of thinking about building assignments, developing assignments for our students that are interculturally aware. And I will be more than happy to continue the conversation in July, in a couple of weeks. Thank you.